They thought it was just another boring physics class. A quiet female instructor. Chalk. Equations. No rank on display. Fresh recruits, barely 18, smirked, whispered, tested limits. They believed the uniform made them untouchable. What they didn't know was that the woman at the front of the room wasn't just teaching trajectories and force, she had lived them. When disrespect crossed the line, she didn't raise her voice. She closed the door. And in less than a minute, the room learned a permanent lesson. She wasn't just a teacher, she was Navy SEAL. From wherever you're watching, let us know in the comments. And if this story has earned you respect, click like so others can find it too. Camp Pendleton's academic wing was quieter than the barracks, sterile even, where sound traveled differently and boots echoed off linoleum instead of being swallowed by dirt. The physics classroom sat at the end of a long corridor, fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting everything in that flat, institutional glow that made the walls look older than they were. It was Tuesday morning, 800 hours, and the room was filling slowly with fresh recruits, most of them barely 18, still carrying the swagger of boot camp graduation like armor they hadn't yet earned. They threw themselves into chairs, backpacks hitting the floor, voices loud and careless, the kind of noise that came from boys who believed the uniform made them men. At the front of the room stood Dr. Anna Graves, 42 years old, civilian clothes, no rank insignia, no patches, nothing that suggested authority beyond the university credentials framed on the wall behind her desk. She wore dark slacks, a plain button-down shirt tucked neatly, hair pulled back in a low ponytail, glasses perched on her nose. She looked like every physics teacher they'd ever ignored in high school, only older, quieter, easier to dismiss. She stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, writing formulas in careful script while the room filled with the kind of disrespect that grows when young men think no one is watching closely enough. One recruit, Private Jennings, leaned back in his chair until it balanced on two legs, arms crossed, grinning at the private next to him. "This is what they got us doing now," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. "He's sitting through some ladies' math class like we're still in high school?" The private beside him, Morrison, snorted softly. "Bet she's never even held a rifle." Jennings smirked wider. "Bet she's never even seen one." Anna didn't turn around. She kept writing, her hand steady, the marker squeaking faintly against the board. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. But she said nothing, and her silence was mistaken for weakness. The recruits settled into their seats, some slouching, some scrolling through phones they weren't supposed to have, others whispering jokes that weren't as quiet as they thought. The disrespect was casual, thoughtless, the kind that comes from people who assume the world will always bend around them. A paper airplane sailed across the room, landing near Anna's feet. She didn't pick it up. She didn't acknowledge it. She just kept writing, her posture unchanged, her focus absolute. The recruit who threw it, a stocky private named Coleman, grinned at his neighbors, waiting for her to react. When she didn't, he leaned back, satisfied, as though her silence confirmed his superiority. Anna finished writing and set the marker down on the tray beneath the board. She turned slowly, eyes sweeping the room, taking in every face, every posture, every smirk that hadn't yet learned to hide itself. Her expression was neutral, unreadable, the kind of calm that could be mistaken for indifference if you didn't know what you were looking at. "Good morning," she said, her voice quiet but clear, carrying to the back of the room without effort. A few recruits mumbled responses. Most didn't bother. Jennings stretched his legs out into the aisle, his boots scuffed and unlaced, making himself comfortable like he was settling in for a movie he didn't plan to watch. Anna didn't react. She picked up a piece of chalk and tapped it lightly against the board. "Today we're covering projectile motion," she continued. "Velocity, trajectory, wind resistance, the mathematics that determine whether a round hits its target or misses by inches." She spoke without notes, her tone steady, professional, almost detached. She could have been reading a grocery list for all the energy she put into it. Morrison leaned toward Jennings and whispered, "Think she knows the difference between a rifle and a BB gun?" Jennings grinned, shaking his head. "Doubt it." Anna's eyes flicked toward them, just for a moment, then away. She didn't call them out. She didn't raise her voice. She just kept teaching, writing another equation on the board, her handwriting precise, her movements economical. The lesson continued. She explained the physics of ballistics, the way gravity and wind altered a bullet's path, the calculations that separated a kill shot from a miss. She drew diagrams, labeled forces, walked through examples with the kind of clarity that came from someone who had done this 1,000 times. But the recruits weren't listening. Jennings pulled out his phone, thumbing through messages under the desk. Morrison doodled on his notebook, drawing crude stick figures and weapons. Others stared out the window or talked quietly among themselves, treating the class like background noise they could tune out whenever they wanted. Coleman crumpled another piece of paper, preparing to throw it, but paused when a nearby recruit elbowed him, whispering something that made him reconsider. Still, the disrespect lingered in the air, thick and uncomfortable. Anna finished her explanation and set the chalk down again. She turned to face the room, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the desk. "Any questions?" she asked. Silence. Not the respectful kind. The kind that came from people who couldn't be bothered. Jennings raised his hand lazily, not bothering to sit up straight. Anna nodded toward him. "Yes," he grinned, glancing at Morrison for approval before speaking. "Yeah, I got a question. When do we get to the part where this actually matters?" A ripple of laughter moved through the room, quiet but unmistakable. Anna's expression didn't change. "It matters every time you pull a trigger," she replied evenly. "It matters when you're trying to hit a target at 800 meters in a crosswind. It matters when someone's life depends on whether you calculated correctly." Jennings shrugged, unimpressed. "Yeah, but you ever actually done that? Or is this just theory?" The room went still. Morrison's grin widened. A few others leaned forward, sensing something about to happen, waiting to see if she would break. Anna looked at Jennings for a long moment, her face calm, her eyes unreadable. Then she smiled, just barely, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good question," she said quietly. She walked to the door, slow and deliberate, her boots making soft clicks against the linoleum. She reached the door, gripped the handle, and closed it with a quiet finality that echoed in the silence. The click of the lock was louder than it should have been. The recruits shifted in their seats, the laughter dying in their throats, confusion replacing amusement. Anna turned back to face them, her hands at her sides, relaxed but ready. "Stand up," she said, her voice still quiet but carrying a weight it hadn't before. No one moved. Jennings glanced at Morrison, uncertain now, the smirk fading. "What?" Anna took a step forward. "I said stand up." Something in her tone made them obey. Chairs scraped against the floor as the recruits rose, awkward, unsure, looking at each other for guidance no one could provide. Anna walked to the center of the room, positioning herself between the rows of desks, her posture loose, her eyes scanning each of them in turn. "You want to know if I've done it?" she asked, her voice still calm, still controlled. "You want to know if this is just theory?" She gestured toward Jennings. "You... come here." Jennings hesitated, his confidence cracking. "What?" "Come here," Anna repeated, her tone flat, brooking no argument. Jennings stepped forward, trying to salvage his swagger, his hands loose at his sides. He stopped a few feet in front of her, taller, broader, younger, grinning like this was still a joke he could win. Anna looked up at him, unflinching. "Put your hands on me," she said. The room went dead silent. Jennings blinked. "What?" "Put your hands on me," Anna repeated. "However you want. Try to control me. Try to stop me. Do it." Jennings laughed nervously, glancing back at Morrison. "I'm not gonna..." "Do it," Anna said, her voice sharper now, cutting through his hesitation. "Or sit down and stop wasting everyone's time." Jennings's jaw tightened. Pride overrode caution. He stepped forward, reaching for her shoulder, his grip firm, confident, expecting her to flinch or step back. She didn't. In less than a second, Anna's hand shot up, gripping his wrist, her fingers finding pressure points with surgical precision. Jennings gasped, his knees buckling involuntarily. Before he could react, she pivoted, her body twisting smoothly, using his own momentum to pull him off balance. His feet left the ground. He hit the floor hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs, his vision blurring for a moment. Anna stood over him, her hand still controlling his wrist, her knee pressed lightly against his chest, not enough to hurt, but enough to make it clear he couldn't move. Physics, she said quietly, looking down at him. Force, leverage, momentum. You just learned all three. She released him and stepped back, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. Jennings rolled onto his side and coughing, his face flushed with humiliation. Anna turned to the rest of the class, her eyes sweeping the room. Anyone else? No one spoke. No one moved. The swagger was gone, replaced by something closer to fear, or respect, or both. Anna walked back to the front of the room, picking up her chalk like nothing had happened. "Sit down," she said. They sat. Jennings pulled himself back into his chair, avoiding eye contact and his face burning. Anna turned to the board and resumed the lesson, her voice calm, professional, as though the last minute had never occurred. "As I was saying," she continued, writing another equation, trajectory depends on initial velocity, angle of elevation, and environmental factors. Miscalculate any of them, and you miss. Understand them, and you don't. This time every recruit in the room was listening, not because they wanted to, because they had to. The lesson continued in silence, the only sound the scratch of chalk against the board and the quiet shuffling of notebooks as recruits scrambled to take notes they should have been taking from the beginning. Anna explained wind drift, the Coriolis effect, how temperature altered powder burn rates and muzzle velocity. She didn't simplify. She didn't slow down. She taught the way someone taught when they knew the material wasn't optional, when failure wasn't academic but lethal. Jennings sat rigid in his chair, his wrist still throbbing. His pride shattered across the linoleum like glass. He didn't look at Morrison. He didn't look at anyone. He stared at his notebook, pen pressed too hard against the paper, the lines he drew shaky and uneven. Morrison wasn't drawing stick figures anymore. He was writing, trying to keep up, his earlier smirk replaced by something quieter, something that looked like shame. The others followed suit. Phones disappeared. Whispers stopped. The room had transformed, not through shouting or threats, but through a single moment of undeniable truth. Anna finished the equation and set the chalk down, turning to face them again. "Questions?" she asked. A hand went up, slowly, hesitantly. A private in the back row, one who hadn't spoken before. "Ma'am," he said, his voice careful, respectful. "How did you learn that?" Anna looked at him for a moment, considering the question, deciding how much to say. "Training," she replied simply. "A long time ago." "What kind of training?" another recruit asked, his tone genuine, no longer testing. Anna's expression softened, just slightly, but she didn't smile. "The kind you don't talk about." The room stayed silent. The weight of that answer settled over them like a blanket, heavy and immovable. They understood, or they thought they did, and either way, they knew better than to push further. Anna walked to her desk and picked up a folder, flipping it open, scanning the roster inside. "This class isn't optional," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You're here because the Corps believes you need to understand the science behind what you do. Ballistics, logistics, navigation. These aren't abstract concepts. They're survival. They're mission success. They're the difference between coming home and being carried home." She closed the folder and looked up, meeting their eyes one by one. "You can dismiss that if you want. You can sit here and treat this like high school. But when you're downrange, when the variables are real and the consequences are permanent, you're going to wish you paid attention." No one argued. No one looked away. Anna set the folder down and crossed her arms, leaning back against the desk. "I don't need your respect," she said quietly. "I don't need you to like me. I need you to learn. Because one day, someone's life is going to depend on whether you remember what I taught you in this room." The words hung in the air, undeniable. Jennings shifted in his seat, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists on the desk. He wanted to say something, to salvage what was left of his pride, but he couldn't find the words. Anna didn't wait for him. She pushed off the desk and walked back to the board, picking up the chalk again. "Let's continue," she said. Next scenario. Moving target, 1,200 meters. Wind gusting at 15 knots from the northwest. Walk me through the calculations. Hands went up this time, not all of them, but enough. The hour dragged on, not because it was boring, but because every second felt heavier than it should have. The recruits scribbled notes, asked questions, worked through problems on their own paper while Anna circled the room, correcting mistakes, offering guidance, her presence no longer invisible, but impossible to ignore. When the bell rang, no one moved immediately. They waited, watching her, unsure if they were dismissed. Anna glanced at the clock, then back at them. "That's all for today," she said. "Read Chapter 6 tonight. We'll cover atmospheric pressure tomorrow." They stood slowly, gathering their things, their movements quieter than they had been an hour ago. Jennings was the last to leave, pausing at the door, his hand on the frame. He looked back at Anna, who was erasing the board, her back to him. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low. Anna turned, meeting his eyes. Jennings swallowed, his throat dry. "I'm sorry." Anna held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Be better." Jennings nodded, his face flushed, and left without another word. The room emptied. The door swung shut. Anna set the eraser down and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds beyond, where recruits ran drills under the California sun. She stood there for a long time, her reflection faint in the glass, her expression unreadable. She had been Navy SEAL, not support, not admin. She had carried a rifle, breached doors, pulled triggers in the dark. She had saved lives and taken them. She had earned a trident most would never see, let alone understand. And when her time in the teams ended, when injuries and time made the choice for her, she had transitioned quietly into this teaching the science behind the skills, passing on what she knew to those who would come after. She didn't talk about it. She didn't wear it like a badge. She just carried it, the way she carried everything else, silently, without complaint. The hallway outside her classroom was never empty for long. Between classes, recruits moved in waves, their voices echoing off the walls, boots scuffing against the polished floors. Anna gathered her materials, sliding papers into folders, organizing the desk with the same precision she applied to everything else. A knock came at the door. She looked up. A sergeant stood in the doorway, older than the recruits, weathered by years of service. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Dr. Graves," he said, his tone respectful. "Got a minute?" Anna nodded, setting her folder down. "Of course." The sergeant walked closer, his hands clasped behind his back. "Word travels fast around here," he said. "Heard you had an interesting class this morning." Anna's expression didn't change. "They learned something," she replied. The sergeant smiled faintly. "I'm sure they did." He paused, studying her. "Most instructors would have written them up, sent them to the CO. You didn't." "No," Anna said. "I didn't." "Why not?" Anna considered the question, her eyes drifting to the window. "Because writing them up wouldn't have taught them anything," she said quietly. "It would have made me the problem, not their behavior. They needed to understand why respect matters, not be forced into it." The sergeant nodded slowly. "That's a harder lesson to teach." "It's the only one that lasts," Anna replied. The sergeant was quiet for a moment, then he extended his hand. "You've got my respect, ma'am, for what it's worth." Anna shook his hand, her grip firm. "It's worth something," she said. He left, and the room fell silent again. Anna returned to the window, her thoughts drifting to places she rarely allowed them to go. The desert, the heat, the weight of gear pressing into her shoulders, the taste of dust in her mouth, the sound of rotors overhead. She had been younger then, harder, driven by something she couldn't name. The teams had been her life, her identity, the only place where her competence was never questioned, where silence was understood as strength rather than weakness. She had proven herself 1,000 times over, in training, in the field, in moments where hesitation meant death. And when it ended, when her body could no longer keep pace with the demands, she had walked away without ceremony, without fanfare, carrying her trident in a box she kept locked in a drawer at home. The transition to teaching had been difficult, The classroom felt too small, too safe, too far removed from the stakes she had grown accustomed to. But over time, she had found purpose in it. The knowledge she carried, the skills she had honed, they didn't have to die with her. They could be passed on, refined, used by those who came after. That mattered, even if no one knew where it came from. The next morning, when the recruits filed into her classroom, they were different. They sat straighter. They didn't whisper. They didn't pull out phones or slouch in their chairs. When Anna walked in, every one of them stood. She paused, surprised, her eyes sweeping the room. "Sit," she said. They sat. Anna set her materials on the desk and turned to the board, picking up the chalk. "Chapter 6, she said. Atmospheric pressure and its effects on long-range accuracy. This time, they were ready. This time, they listened. The lesson progressed smoothly, questions asked with genuine curiosity, answers received with focus. Anna moved through the material with the same calm efficiency, but something had shifted. The room felt different. The air was charged with attention, with effort, with the kind of discipline that came from understanding rather than obligation. Halfway through the class, Anna paused, setting the chalk down. "Let me show you something," she said. She walked to the side of the room and opened a cabinet, pulling out a long case. She set it on the desk and unlatched it, revealing a rifle inside. Not a standard issue M4, but something older, heavier, a bolt-action precision weapon with wear marks that spoke of use. The recruits leaned forward, their interest immediate. Anna lifted the rifle carefully, checking the chamber, ensuring it was clear. "This, she said, is what happens when you apply the theory correctly." She held the rifle up, demonstrating the grip, the stance, the way weight distributed across the body. "Every calculation we've covered in this class, every formula, every variable, it all comes down to this moment, the moment you take the shot." She set the rifle down gently, her hands resting on the stock. "You can have the best equipment in the world," she continued. "You can have perfect conditions. But if you don't understand the science, if you don't respect the variables, you'll miss. And missing has consequences." She looked up, meeting their eyes. "In training, it's embarrassment. In the field, it's something else entirely." The room was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of disrespect, but the focused silence of people absorbing information they knew they needed. Anna returned the rifle to its case and latched it shut, sliding it back into the cabinet. "Back to atmospheric pressure," she said, returning to the board. The lesson continued. When class ended, the recruits filed out quietly, but several lingered near the door, hesitant. Morrison was one of them. He approached Anna's desk, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his posture uncertain. "Ma'am," he said. Anna looked up from her notes. "Yes?" Morrison shifted his weight, struggling to find the words. "I just wanted to say, yesterday, I was out of line. We all were. I'm sorry." Anna studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Apology accepted?" Morrison nodded, relief visible on his face, and turned to leave. "Morrison," Anna called. He stopped, looking back. "Don't apologize to me," she said. "Apologize to yourself. You wasted your own time yesterday. Make sure it doesn't happen again." Morrison's expression shifted, something clicking into place. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and left. The weeks that followed brought change, subtle but undeniable. Anna's classroom became known across the base, not for the instructor's background, which remained largely unknown, but for the quality of the teaching, the clarity of the lessons, the way recruits emerged with knowledge they actually retained. Other instructors noticed. Some asked her methods. Anna shared what she could, kept the rest to herself. One afternoon, a training exercise was scheduled on the range. Anna was asked to observe, to provide feedback on accuracy issues the unit had been experiencing. She agreed, standing at the edge of the range while recruits took positions, aiming at targets downrange. The wind was strong that day, gusting unpredictably, making the shots difficult. Anna watched, her eyes tracking each recruit's stance, their breathing, the way they adjusted for conditions. Most of them struggled. Shots went wide, impacting dirt rather than targets. Frustration mounted. The range officer called a halt, gathering the recruits for a debrief. "You're not compensating for Wyndham," he said. "You're aiming like it's a calm day." One of the recruits, a private Anna didn't recognize, spoke up. "So how are we supposed to know how much to adjust?" The range officer started to answer, but Anna stepped forward. "May I?" she asked. The range officer nodded, stepping aside. Anna walked to the firing line, picking up one of the rifles. She checked it, cleared it, then loaded a single round. The recruits watched, curious. Anna took a position, her body settling into a stance that looked effortless, but was built on years of muscle memory. She didn't rush. She observed the wind, feeling it against her skin, watching the way dust moved across the range. She made a minute adjustment to her aim, her breathing slowing, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The shot cracked through the air, downrange. The target showed a clean hit, center mass. Anna lowered the rifle, safed it, and set it down. She turned to the recruits. "You calculate the wind speed, estimate the distance it will push the round, and adjust your point of aim accordingly," she said. "But you also feel it. You observe. You don't guess. You know." She gestured to the range. "Try again." The recruits returned to their positions, this time with renewed focus. The difference was immediate. Shots landed closer to targets, accuracy improving with each iteration. By the end of the session, even the struggling recruits were hitting more than they missed. The range officer approached Anna as the recruits cleared the line. "That was impressive," he said. Anna shrugged. "They just needed to see it done correctly," she replied. The range officer studied her for a moment. "You've done this before," he said. It wasn't a question. Anna met his eyes but said nothing. The range officer nodded, understanding the silence for what it was. "Well," he said, "we're lucky to have you." Anna didn't respond to that either. She just turned and walked back toward the academic building, her boots crunching against gravel, leaving the range behind. That evening, alone in her office, Anna sat at her desk, grading papers. The work was quiet, methodical, a rhythm she found comforting. A photo sat on the corner of her desk, small, unobtrusive. It showed a younger version of herself, standing in the desert, surrounded by men whose faces were blurred, whose identities were protected even in memory. She looked at it sometimes, when the weight of silence became too heavy, when she needed to remember why she carried it. The door to her office opened. She looked up. Jennings stood there, hesitant. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have a minute?" Anna gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit." Jennings sat, his posture tense, his hands clasped in his lap. He didn't speak immediately, struggling with whatever had brought him here. Anna waited, patient. "I've been thinking," Jennings finally said, "about what you said, about being better." Anna set her pen down, giving him her full attention. "And I want to be," Jennings said. "I want to be the kind of person who doesn't waste time, who respects the work. I don't know how." Anna leaned back in her chair, considering him. "You start by showing up," she said. "Every day. You do the work, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You stop looking for shortcuts. You stop measuring yourself against other people and start measuring yourself against who you were yesterday." Jennings nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "Is that what you did?" he asked. Anna smiled faintly. "It's what I'm still doing," she replied. Jennings stood, nodding. "Thank you, ma'am." He left, and Anna returned to her papers, but the conversation lingered. That was the work now. Not the missions, not the operations, but this. Planting seeds, watching them grow, hoping they took root. Days turned into weeks. The recruits in Anna's class continued to improve, their performance noted by superiors, their attitudes shifting from resistance to respect. Anna remained unchanged, quiet, professional, never seeking recognition, never explaining more than necessary. She was content in the work itself, in the knowledge that what she taught mattered, that it would save lives someday, somewhere, in ways she would never witness. And in the silence of her classroom, in the precision of her lessons, in the steady, unshakable competence she brought to every moment, Anna Graves carried forward the legacy of those who had trained her, who had fought beside her, who had taught her that true strength didn't need to announce itself. It simply was, and that was enough.